Tim and Tom. Tim, Tom, Tim and Tom. Tim and Tom. Tim and Tom. Tim and Tom. Tim and Tom.
It is Tim and Tom. Tom, I'm excited about this one. We've been talking about it throughout the show, but we've been known to get a little political on the Facebook and stuff like that, especially with the last election that came up, and things get a little dicey sometimes when you're out there on the social media having an opinion and saying it loud and proud.
Yeah, actually, we've been excited about this interview in particular, even before we kind of rebooted Tim and Tom up again, because I became aware of them through, researching local places to go and to attend because of that last election. So really excited to talk to our guest tonight. Always bringing the best guests.
Right. We try. So we have Dr. Alan Katz, professor at UMKC, former ambassador to Portugal, if I said that right. You with us, Doctor?
That's correct.
All right. And so you've started American Public Square. How long ago was this now?
Okay. Well, we started American Public Square here in Kansas City a little over 3 years ago.
Okay.
And it kind of grew out of something that I'd created when I lived in Tallahassee, Florida back in 2006. So the idea had sort of been nurtured back then, but when I came to Kansas City to teach at UMKC, sort of recruited by the chancellor, he asked me what I would like to do while I was here, and I told him what I'd done in Florida, and I'd like to see whether we could make it work here.
So for those who aren't aware what the American Public Square is, describe kind of, the condensed version of what the goal is for this organization.
Okay, basically American Public Square is a series of community programs, and the organization is a group of non-like-minded people who are willing to participate in a program on a controversial issue that's fact-based and civil. And the idea behind it essentially is to demonstrate that people who have very strong opinions, who don't agree with each other, can nonetheless have that disagreement based on facts, and without demonizing people with whom you disagree. It seems like most of the time now, if we find someone that doesn't agree with us, doesn't matter whether you're coming from the left or the right, we ascribe the worst possible motives to why they don't agree with us.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of American Public Square is saying, no, that's really not necessarily the case in a lot of situations. So we create panels of people who have different points of view. We turn it into a conversation as opposed to a confrontation. We let people from the audience ask questions. We have real-time fact checkers, so people can't make stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they do make it up, they get caught at it. And the idea is not to embarrass people, but to give them a chance to walk it back. We tell the audience don't applaud because we don't want a bunch of red meat lines, which are competing red meat lines that we don't think is very productive.
Mm-hmm.
And we have what we call our civility bell, where a number of people have it. And if someone gets uncivil, they ring the bell and everything stops. And we kind of reboot and start all over again. So we are entering our fourth season. We just had a program at the World War I Museum on the future of American political parties. It's about 10 days ago. And we had almost 500 people there. We had on the panel, we had Howard Dean, former chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Danny Diaz, who ran Jeb Bush's campaign, Greg Orman, who ran, of course, as an independent for the Senate in Kansas, Jackie Salett, who runs the Independence Party out of New York, and Beth Benami, who is the chairman of the Political Science Department at UMKC. And we were able to have really a pretty good conversation. And we had, the World War I Museum said they'd never had a crowd that big there. And really what it's demonstrating to me is the idea that, there is an audience out there for this, that people, we turn on television and we see basically food fights that pass as political discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't think, and the whole concept behind this was that really most Americans don't find that particularly enlightening. And it doesn't enlighten them. It doesn't make it a pleasant place to be. And so we're trying to provide, a safe place where people who don't agree can come and disagree agreeably.
To book guests, going back to season 1 of the American Public Square, was it difficult to book guests, or was it, simply the idea that they loved and they wanted to be a part of it?
Well, it's probably somewhere in between. I don't think that we reached out for people that we felt would present a point of view that we thought was one that needed to be discussed, and depending upon where people were politically, if they were on the left, they looked at some of the guests that we booked and they said, "How can you have someone like that? They're so right wing." And in fact, some of our members on the right said, "How can you book someone like that because they're so left wing?" Which made me think that we probably had it just about right. Mm-hmm. And I think that, but because we don't pay any of our speakers, we get them to come on their own, and we try to encourage them, cajole them, whatever it may happen to be. That what happens is that we've been very fortunate and had a very interesting array of individuals who've been willing to give their time to participate in this kind of a conversation.
So how do you battle? You've got your panel there. You say you've got real-time fact checkers. In this day and age where we have alternative facts and people labeling everything fake news, do you get some blowback with that? How do you handle a disagreement in what they agree is a fact or not?
Well, first of all, what we have is this. We have research librarians who are the fact checkers. Mm-hmm. And so these are not people from one side or the other.
Sure.
And really, there was one panelist who at one event turned, and I was the moderator, and he said, "Who's checking the fact checkers?" I said, "We're not going down that road."
Right.
The reality is we have research librarians here, and they're calling up, and then they're giving the source of their information when they correct something. And so I said, we're not going to worry about that. And it's the only incident in all of our events that where it's ever even come up.
Well, that's good. So I got to tell you, every time we've talked to somebody about American Public Square coming up on an episode of our show, and then we give them kind of the elevator speech of what the goal is of your program here, people are just incredulous. They seem to think this is an impossible task. How much of that do you run into? Do you have to kind of talk people off the ledge with this sort of thing, or are people mostly open to it when you talk about it?
You do run into people. Look, I've been involved in government and politics most of my adult life.
Okay.
I've been around it, so it's not like, I'm not a naif and I'm not naive about the extent of the problems that I think we face in this country. I do think, however, that the first thing people ask me, so what's the product of this, And my answer is the product is the process. It's the process of people seeing you really can have these conversations. They don't have to be nasty. They can be fact-based, and which means that issues that we're discussing, people come away from it understanding that it's more complicated, maybe, than they walk in. You're not turning liberals into conservatives or vice versa. But hopefully what you're doing is you're letting people understand that there is another point of view which is not born out of meanness or lack of concern about, their country. It's rather just a different point of view, and that alone, I think, changes things in a way that, in two ways. First of all, it adds in the community's mind that these issues are more complicated. And secondly, it says to the elected officials and the decision makers who they appoint or who they elect, who we all elect, that, you don't have to turn this into a zero-sum game. You don't have to turn this into something that says, if you don't agree with me, you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. Because here we have all these programs going on, and these people come from all over the country to come participate in these panels to talk about the fact that it is more complicated than that. In fact, what I always tell my students the first day of class is what I always call it's my favorite quote from Lyndon Johnson, which is, for every complicated problem, there's always a simple answer, and it's always wrong. Okay. And if people could just recognize that, for the obvious point, if it was a simple answer, somebody would have done it. Mm-hmm. And so when people keep coming up sort of saying, well, the answer to X is Y, my response to that is, well, Y may be part of the answer, but it probably isn't the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And what we try to do in these conversations is to demonstrate that there are different gradations and different perspectives from different people who are knowledgeable, and that they didn't get that impression. They didn't reach the conclusion that they've reached just by sort of waking up one day and deciding that they had a revelation.
Checking out your website, I'm looking at your upcoming events, and they're kind of wide ranging from food insecurity to NATO to the Affordable Care Act, and they're all very, very captivating. And as you said, there's both sides to these issues. But I want to know, how do you come up with these issues, and how is that scheduling going for this? Is it just November is a month where we talk about food issues, for example, or how does that work for scheduling these events?
Well, okay, that's a good question. What we try to do is we sit down before usually in the spring, and we'll pull up every program we've already done, and we'll try to look for a continuum. We have sort of 5 basic circles under which are sort of larger topics that we have. Any program we do falls under. One is civic, one is community, one is healthcare, one is education, and one is faith. And somewhere in there, virtually everything would fall anyway. So, but for us, what we try to do is sort of say, okay, each year we're going to have at least one program from each one of those areas. And then the issue becomes, how do we sort of bring the program together? And part of it is that, we become a membership organization. So we have like 400 members who are paid members. We have probably 4,000 to 5,000 people who have attended at least one of our events. And we try to keep in touch with them. We have a program committee, which we've just finally grown, and so they're going to be meeting shortly to go through, starting to look at next year's programs. And so there's no magic to it. It's really sort of, we will sit down and sort of say, we like these topics. We found community support, both in terms of institutions and individuals who will help us underwrite this, because we are a not-for-profit. And what we do is we sort of cobble something together that we think makes sense. And then invariably what happens is something comes along that we didn't plan on. And the first year was minimum wage, and the next year it was Muslims in Metro. And we just keep finding something that's going to, because it's topical and it jumps out, and we try to grab it and do something. Last year was we were asked to do something by the Lyric Opera, of all people. They were bringing in Dead Man Walking. And so they wanted to do a program on the death penalty. And so they wound up going, I think someone there talked to Adam Hamilton at the Church of the Resurrection. Adam said, call Alan Katz at American Public Square. And so we did a program down at the library in which Adam was on the panel. So what happens is that we've tried to build a lot of relationships around the community with everyone from, Reverend Hamilton to Community Christ and Independence. We're about to launch a series of programs with the Truman Presidential Library. We work with KCPT and KCUR, the Kansas City Star, live stream through their Facebook account. The program we had on the future of American political parties and had about 8,000 views. So we just keep working at it.
That is great to hear. I wanted to know, though, of the programs, or excuse me, of the events that you've done so far, is there one that stands out to you that you've had the most the best time at, or maybe a speaker, really got your attention? Is there any of those events that have really stuck out to you?
Well, it's always hard to sort of pick out one. We had a very early one we had was on, which I always use this as an example of how you can do these things. We had one on immigration, and we had 2 economists who were immigration economists, and we had Chris Kobach, and we had the national vice president of La Raza.
Oh, wow.
And what I try to explain to people, I said, and nobody ever raised their voice.
Really?
It wasn't unpleasant. And we had it out at the Community Christ in Independence, and it was a snowstorm that night.
Oh.
And I remember driving out with my wife, turning to her saying, if this wasn't my program, I'd go home. I'm not sure anyone's going to show up,
Yeah, we may have to get along all night. Yeah.
230 people showed up for dinner. So,
wow.
The other thing is we try to connect food with all these things because we think food is a great civilizing influence on people.
Yeah. So I hear you mentioning we a lot. So, I mean, obviously you don't run this by yourself from your cell phone. You've got a big staff involved here, I'm assuming, or?
Well, we have a staff and a very good staff. We also have an advisory board, which really sort of gave us the added credibility in the community when we began. Our co-chairs are Mary Block and Peggy Dunn. And when I first met Mary and asked her to do this, I had no idea whether she was a Democrat or Republican. So when she told me she was a Democrat, I said, well, that's great. Now we need to find a Republican to be your co-chair.
Right.
And when I started this, the original idea thought was, should we say it's nonpartisan? But the problem is no one believes anything's nonpartisan anymore.
Right.
So we're bipartisan. We basically we like to think we have Democrats and Republicans on our board. We look at our programs. We generally have people from different points of view, and so I think that we are we try very hard, and we don't always get it. I mean, we work really hard to make our attendees be as diverse as possible. And when we started, frankly, we were probably too white, too well-educated, too well-off, too liberal. And we worked very hard at expanding the appeal of our programming to people who are more conservative and people who are more people of color, and also different types of people in the community that might normally go to a program like ours.
You spoke earlier about membership alongside the American Public Square. For people who are interested, by listening to this interview, what does that entail? What does a membership look like for the American Public Square?
Well, we have memberships that range from $75 a year to $2,500 a year. We obviously encourage anyone who would like a $2,500 membership. We would be very happy to hear from them.
Sure.
But seriously, on the $75 membership, and if you go to AmericanPublicSquare.org or go to our website, you can see how you can sign up. What a membership gives you is free access to all of our programs. Mm-hmm. And it also, and at least 3 or 4 of those a year are dinners, and so those dinners are free. Mm-hmm. And as you buy a membership that costs more, you can bring more people to dinners, and there are a few other benefits that accrue to it.
Sure. So then, you mentioned the bipartisan aspect of it. What about with the growing trend to kind of split away from just two parties? Are you actively involved in trying to think of that, or how do you guys tackle that?
Well, when we did when we did the program on political parties, we had 2 people on the panel. Mm-hmm. Greg Orman, who's an independent, of course, and Jackie Salet, who's been part of the Independence Party in New York. So, if anything, we kind of overweighted that way. Sure. But yeah, no, we try to be very cognizant of the fact that there are points of view that are not just can be attributed to either Republicans or Democrats.
Sure.
And sometimes what you'll wind up in, you'll have a topic. We have a program on food safety coming up on the 9th of November. And there's a serious, one of the early bits of scholarship basically said, well, people who live in food deserts, that's the reason that they don't have, access to good food. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of work that indicates there are other people who would argue that's not true, that there are other reasons, there are different reasons. We did a program on opioids before it was, we thought it was a crisis, but now everyone else knows it's a crisis. Right. And we had people on there who basically felt that a registry for Missouri would be bad because it was an invasion of privacy. And we had someone who also believed that access to opioids was important in terms of pain management. So you've got, this is not a Democratic or Republican position. These are just different views. And right. So to the extent that we can find people who can, represent these different views, who, regardless of their party, we think it's probably we like to think we're doing a public service in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Looking ahead, what are some of the benchmarks or goals for the American Public Square? Is this to continue to do more events in Kansas City? Are you looking to make this a traveling nonprofit organization that's doing events in other towns? What do you have looking forward?
Well, okay, we're not looking to sort of to turn this into a barnstorming tour. Sure. We have been approached from time to time by people in different cities, and we've told them we're an open source network. Whatever we can do to help them get it set up in their town, we're happy to do. And what we've been able to do, and we're doing more of in Kansas City, is we're getting to a lot of different places. We've had programs out at the Church of the Resurrection. We've had them at Donnelly College, UMKC. We've had them at Church Community of Christ, the Truman Library. And I know I'm forgetting 3 or 4 other places, but sure. The point has been we want to continue to move our programming around the community because there are a lot of people in the community who won't travel the distance, but they will travel a short period of time. They come to your program, and if they like what you're doing, then they'll follow you somewhere else. So the goal here really is to make this sustainable in terms of growing our membership. It's a question of sort of being able to figure out. People keep saying, well, is there a what next after they go, fine, I go to a program, I hear all this stuff, what next? And that's what we're working on right now, trying to figure out what that looks like.
So, and I like how you kind of mentioned earlier where it's not necessarily about political parties, it's more so about opposing views and trying to bring those to having civic discourse or civil discourse.
Right.
But this does feel like local officials to me should get involved in this. I kind of want my elected officials to be involved in this. Has there been any push like that to try to get, mayors?
Yeah, we've had,
and whatnot?
actually, Mayor James has been on a couple of our panels, and they've been very supportive of what we're doing.
Yeah.
We continue to look around. And in some ways, the interesting thing is, we have tried to avoid, for the most part, people who are currently holding public office or are running for public office because it just changes their approach in most cases in terms of what they're willing to say.
Yeah.
We actually find ourselves, things are a little easier if you find people who have served in public office because they have a perspective that is different and they're usually willing to be a little more candid about it. That's not true in all cases. And the mayor's been very candid on both of the programs that he was on, and both of them were very tough programs because in terms of education, we had some really, really difficult conversations. So it isn't always true, and a lot depends on whether you know the person or whether it's someone that you just really don't want to turn them in. You're not really looking for them to give a campaign speech.
Right.
For the curious listener that's finding more interest in the American Public Square, is there events that they can attend, to get a feel for what this is, or do they have to become a member first, and then that's the way they attend event?
Yeah, no, right, no. Actually, we've been very, very forthcoming in that regard. If someone contacts us and says, well, I don't really know what you are. It looks kind of interesting to me. Could I come? Usually for dinners, we charge a small amount for the dinner. If it's not a dinner program, they're welcome to come for free. And, and if someone says, yeah, I'd like to come for the dinner, I can't afford the dinner, then we use about, probably a third of the dinners that we wind up providing with people are paid for, not specifically, but generically by our members.
Okay. I got you.
Because, again, that's part of our outreach program. So anyone who's interested in coming to one of our programs, all they really need to do is to contact American Public Square, and we will do everything we can do to accommodate them.
Well, that's
doesn't mean we won't try to sell them a membership.
Of course not.
The point is that we will try to accommodate them because we think that this is something that has the community to whom it's been exposed has embraced it, frankly, beyond my expectations. And so we believe that we want to continue to broaden that exposure to the community.
No, we're certainly glad you're doing this and you're leading this charge because, man, if the last election taught us anything, is that we're hating each other for some reasons that maybe we shouldn't have to. We can just kind of sit down and talk a lot of these things through. So where else can people find out more information? You guys on, you have a website, social media, that kind of stuff. What can we plug?
We have a website. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Any place that basically, if people want to just go online to AmericanPublicSquare.org, they can. We're happy to have someone talk to them. We'll send them whatever information they're looking for. As I say, our goal here is to get as many people excited about what we're doing as possible.
Well, Doctor, we appreciate you coming on and telling us more about the great work you're doing over there.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully we'll see you guys at one of our events.
Yeah, we'll have to come out and we'll leave the signs and the megaphones at home, though.
You can bring them with you. That's okay. We're a very hospitable group.
Okay. All right. We'll do that then. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Well, there it is. Dr. Alan Katz of American Public Square. What do you think, T-Mac?
Yeah, I loved it. Like I said, a lot of those questions for the interested listener was actually just the interested interviewer. And so I was more asking for myself.
Yeah.
But hopefully people listening were just as interested as I was. But check out AmericanPublicSquare.org, their list of events. They've got wide-ranging topics, as we mentioned. The next one is going to be November 9th. It seems to me from just a quick glance that they've got one going on at least once a month. So if you can't make it to the November 9th, try to come out to December.
And he said
it's very interesting stuff.
Well, and he said the cheapest membership is $75, and then you get a couple free dinners throughout the year. I mean, that's more than going to pay for it in and of itself. I feel like you ought to get one of these just for that. And then you're going to see all kinds of fun conversations while you're at it.
Definitely. And one thing that I find interesting about this is there's so many topics that I find interesting, but that I don't necessarily have an opinion on. I'm not one side or the other. And so I think this is a great platform to use to just educate people who have heard of the opioid crisis, for example, and don't exactly know what that means in the cons and of opioids and things like that. So I think it's an informative event, even though they're also there to get both sides of an argument out. So I'm very interested, and I really like this. This was a really great interview.
Well, and we can all calm down. We don't have to hate each other. We don't have to say, you know, you're like Dr. Katz said a lot. You're a terrible person because you don't also think that we need gun control or whatever your stance is on whatever issue, right? You know, like just calm down. Like we can talk this through. We're adults, most of us, some of us, not us. Here on Tim and Tom. We're going to come back after the break. That's why we'll just be in the crowd and we'll listen and let the adults do the talking.
Taking notes on how to be a civil adult in today's society.
That's what we're there for more, is to take notes on how to have the conversations first, and then we'll have the conversations later. So, all right, we will come back, and Tom's going to keep you up to speed on what's happening around the metro this week when we come back after this break to Tim and Tom.
Fun fact. 3623 Chaplin is an asteroid named in the honor of Charlie Chaplin.
Tim and Tom.